Hi, I'm Lindsay Juergens, and this is Leaders Like Us. Thank you to our series sponsor, JBS, for supporting us. And today we have Chief Kevin Denny with GIPD here. Chief, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Okay, so I was just sharing with you a short bit ago that I like to converse with you in a way that keeps in mind your audience may not know you. So let's just get started at the beginning. How did you get into law enforcement?
I got into law enforcement about halfway through college. So I grew up in Central Texas. I went to Texas A&M about halfway through. My dreams of flying airplanes and being an aeronautical engineer kind of went by the wayside. The math started eating my lunch. And I really started looking at other options out there. I have an uncle that was in law enforcement for a long time. I really admired the way he presented himself, the way he conducted himself in law enforcement. So he was really a role model for me. And so that's what initially led me into law enforcement about halfway through college. And as I was nearing the end of college, I thought, well, I'll look into going into the federal side of things. The more I looked at it and the more I left college and started working on my master's in criminal justice, I kind of gravitated toward local law enforcement, at least initially. And so that's what led me to really long-term for a love with local law enforcement and what that encompasses.
Well, I didn't know that you were sort of gearing up for a federal level. So can you share a little bit about why you transitioned from that federal mindset to local?
Well, at the time, early 90s, if you were going to go into a federal job, FBI, ATF, DEA, for example, most likely that you'd be moved to a large city, not of your choosing. And so you'd have to relocate. So a Miami or a Seattle or Washington, D.C. And I was engaged, about to be married. I liked Texas. And so that's probably what really pushed me initially into more local focus. And the other thing about the local focus to me was that's where you kind of get down and dirty, where you deal with people in the city at a local level, and you're eyeball to eyeball with everybody in that community. And that's what intrigued me, and that to me is what challenged me as a person to do that first. And I thought, well, I'll do that for maybe 4 or 5 years, and then I'll go federal.
Right.
And then, of course, after 3 or 4 years, 5 years into it, I really enjoyed the people I worked with. I enjoyed the community that I worked in. I was still challenged. There's a lot of stuff going on. And for me, career-wise and family-wise. And so I was having a great time and never thought about going federal after about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. It's interesting because if you fast forward to now, you're not even from Grand Island, and yet you're so plugged in. So you definitely seem to present with a local community mindset in what you're doing. So why Grand Island? How did you get here then?
Right. Well, it was a different route for me. And you have to kind of follow. It's hard to track the dots sometimes. But for me, I spent 24 years with Irving Police Department. Toward the end of that career, I'd really done everything I wanted to after 24 years. And for 17 of those years, I had been a sergeant. So I was in narcotics when I promoted in 1999 to sergeant. I spent another 4 years on nights, and then I, as a sergeant, went to the SWAT team. After almost 5 years on the SWAT team, I went to community services. I was over the school resource officers. And so I ended up, after almost 22 years, in criminal investigation. So I was a sergeant still over a group of investigators. And at that point, I mentioned about my master's in criminal justice. I'd never finished it. And I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to go back and at least finish it. And I waited too long to climb the career ladder in Irving. It was a pretty good sized department, just under 400 officers or so.
Oh, yeah.
And so good sized department. And I thought, well, I'll finish my master's and see what else is out there. And finished my master's, and I started looking around, and there was a school district police chief position that was still local. It was just south of Dallas, and I put in for that, and I got that. I was a school district police chief for 4 years, which I thought having a spouse that was a teacher and being over the school resource officers, I knew about school districts and how they worked, but being embedded in one, I learned a lot more.
Oh, I bet.
And that's complemented where I'm at now back in a municipal setting. But after 4 years in that school district, I worked on my master's in public administration. I got that with the idea of going back municipal and maybe working in city management and other areas. And so I got a job as a police chief in a small municipal city just north of where I grew up. And I was there for 2.5 years. And during that time, I just continued. They never kicked me out of school, so I stayed in school. So I finished my my public administration master's, and I was elected to be on the first PhD cohort for Tarleton State University for criminal justice.
Oh, wow.
And
cool.
so during the time I was in the municipal setting, I was working on my PhD and going to classes. And so classes ended. I had no more classes to do. And my wife and I looked around. We have 4 young kids,
Yeah.
girls, all girls. And so we looked outside the state to see what else is out there, to kind of give us a wider range of, you know, what nationally, what's out there, living, education, community, all of that. And Grand Island was one of the places that we looked at.
Yeah.
And so I put in for the position as police chief. Came up for the interviews a year ago. I didn't know anybody in Grand Island. I didn't know anybody in Nebraska. And to me, that was important for putting in for other positions for me personally, was that when I get a position, if I get a position, I do it on my own merits, on my
Right.
own interview ability, on my leadership portrayal, on my history and experience of what I've done in my
Right.
career, not on the idea that I know anybody.
someone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I put in for the position and went through the interview process in November and was appointed by the council last December. And that's kind of my route here.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on my PhD. I've got my dissertation to do, but you can do that from anywhere. And so I don't have to be bound to go to classes and things like that. And so, but Grand Island to me represents a community that's large enough, that's growing, that is dynamic. It's going through I think a fundamental change over the next few years, and I'm excited now that I'm in here and listening to what the community is saying, what the department is talking about, and the direction we're all going to go together. I'm
Yeah.
excited about that because I have no regrets about making the choices or coming up here at all. And
Good.
so yeah, I'm really excited. To me, that's what being a police officer and a police chief is about diving into your community and listening and trying to figure out what the expectations of your community are, and then translating that operationally to how the police department does their business as well, how you protect the community. And that's what the challenge is, and that's what's always intrigued me about local law enforcement. And that's why I've stayed in local law enforcement, you know, for my whole career.
That's awesome. And I feel like you kind of like exactly what you're saying. You do such a good job of being mindful of your community. You don't seem to go rogue and say, well, I'm the top of the heap and everyone beneath me just has to do what I say. Like
Right.
you're constantly seeking input.
Yep.
And that is not always the case in leadership. So thank you for that. My friends in the nonprofit arena, they're continually saying, wow, Chief Denny is such a breath of fresh air. So you're knocking it out of the park, just for the record.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But that's, you know, if you listen, you collaborate, you ask questions, you know, and then you all make a decision in a collaborative sense toward a vision. That's what it's all about. Then your aim will be truer. You'll be less frustrated with, you know, maybe missing the mark. And it's always refinement. I mean, we always know that. So
Sure.
it's not just listen one time, ask a few questions, and then you're off on your own.
No.
It's always coming back and reinforcing, okay, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What do we need to stop doing? You know, is there anything we need to start doing? And so I constantly go around. And in the police department, you know, you have kind of a quasi-military strict hierarchy. And so I like that. But I also I give that the due respect that it needs. And, you know, you need to have a supervisory structure within the police department internally. In most organizations, you need to have some type of a structure. And in the police department, it's probably a little more rigid than most places. But that doesn't prevent me from talking to the officers, asking questions, bouncing
Right.
ideas off of them, going to the community, asking things. And then what I do is I kind of recycle that back around to my position now as a police chief. And so I have to operate through my chain, but that gives me a much more better perspective of, hey, what's going on with this? What's happening out there? What do you guys think about this?
Right.
And the people that I have to work through, that makes for hopefully a better decision in the long run, a better direction. Because once you go through that process, I think you always have to come back around. It's always cyclical, and you have to come back around and go, okay, is what we talked about working? Are you seeing that?
Right.
You know, what do we need, or is there something else that we're talking about, or what are the ripple effects? And that's what fascinates me. I guess mostly about policing, because that's my strength, that's my experience. It just fascinates me about people in general and communities, and how you can get better together, you know,
Yeah.
if you can just get the ego out of the way for the most
Oh my
part.
gosh. You speak into the mic a little louder
Yeah.
about that. So, yeah.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, some people have trouble
Yeah.
getting through the door or back out the door
I
with the
know.
ego.
You have to butter up the forehead. You know what, though? I feel like the point you're making too is talking about, you know, when you say cyclical, and you can't just visit a topic with someone once. You have to check in, because we are evolutionary. Our community is evolutionary. Businesses, our nonprofits, our people, our kids, and so to constantly say, well, I need to follow up. Is this still effective? Is it even relevant anymore? You know, you have to have those continued conversations. So
Absolutely.
such a credit to you.
That is critical. That's critical because, you know, there's several nonprofits that I've gone around and talked to and had conversations with and listened to, and what are the concerns, but that is a long-term process about how we're refining things that we do in the police department, because we're building back staffing levels in the police department. And the question is, do we want to build them back in the same way that we had them, or do we want to listen more in tune with the community in this time and age, post-COVID, you know, things that were going on in the police nationally? And do we want to try to figure out, is there a way to refine and better align police efforts with what the community expectations are?
Yeah.
And that's a constant process. And that's where I think when police departments lose that ability to listen effectively,
Yeah.
that's when you have the issues go on between the police department and the community that it
Yes.
serves. And so the more you're able to listen, question, ask, operationalize, go back through the process again, you know, the less issues you're going to have, because you're communicating effectively with all aspects of your community.
Definitely.
So, and that ties into recruitment. That's a big thing with us right now, is how are we recruiting? Who are we recruiting?
Right.
Grand Island is more diverse than most places in Nebraska. It reminds me of a lot of the places that I worked in Texas. And I think you have to be really intentional, because institutionally, all institutions have a lag time. And so they're lagging behind where society is at the given moment. And because of, you know, people we bring in now, or people that are here now, have been here for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
And the Grand Island 20 or 30 years ago was different. So there's
Yeah.
always an institutional lag.
Yes.
And so as leadership and as leaders, I think that in the police department and in policing, you have to be intentional about reaching out to people in your community that don't know that policing's a viable career path.
Yeah.
And for me, my uncle was in policing. I saw that as a viable career path. But you need to reach out and show, hey, let's do a police ride along. Let me give you a tour of the police station. Let's talk about policing, so that people see friends and family members and things like that are in policing.
Right.
And then that grows organically from there. But
Totally.
you've got to be intentional about starting that, or if you're not, it's gonna take that much longer to happen.
Well, that is so true. I think of anything. And you know, I also think, I have this little theory, that we're all in sales.
That's great. I love that.
I mean, I just think it, and what you're describing to me further confirms that,
Yep.
because you are, and I don't mean that negatively, by the way. I truly mean it is selling, hey, this is who we are, and this is why this matters. And by the way, this is why we might be the right fit for you. That's a sales technique. And if you're doing your job right, you're not turning people off. You're turning people onto
right.
you. So
You you are saying what I've said verbatim within the police department, that we are in sales.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're trying to draw commonalities
Yes.
in order to provide services, in order to more effectively get information so that you can protect your community, so that you can, if you need to figure out a criminal event and solve a crime, you're in sales, and we are in sales. And we need to continue to push that idea and that paradigm, me specifically in policing, because we kind of tend to get into a police department and go, okay, I'm the authority. Well,
Right.
you know, we're doing things within this police department to kind of tone that down and debunk that and flip the
So good.
narrative. I worked at a grocery store through college, and a lot of that time was spent selling seafood. And so to me, it doesn't matter whether you're selling seafood or you're selling cars or you're selling, $1 million mutual funds or whatever. It's about finding the commonality between
Yes.
you and somebody else and trying to get that, and that common point that you can start communicating on, that respect point. And
Yeah.
so to me, sales is what we're in, and I've looked at different ways to try to reinforce that the department is in, that every individual officer should be thinking in terms of sales. And so I've thought
Makes sense.
I've thought off the grid. So the sales things is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And I've thought about different things that we do as far as how we recruit and how we train people. And I've thought about getting a connection with a car dealership and sending new recruits out to the car dealership to partner with sales.
Oh my
and say, okay,
gosh.
here's that person on the lot. Go out there and talk to him and try to sell a car.
Just get out there with that human.
Just
and,
do it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
The things that we did in Texas, in my last department in Texas, because as a chief, as a person in law enforcement, the people that we want in general in law enforcement are people that are coachable and approachable.
Yeah.
And so we need somebody, the skill set we can always train.
Right.
But if we have somebody that you can coach, that is approachable to people in the community, if you're standing in line at a Starbucks or a coffee shop and a citizen can walk up and say, can you tell me where this is, or can you tell me, what the housing situation is like here in Grand Island?
Right.
You should be able to have a conversation with that individual. So that's who we
Definitely.
need. And so we would do some things that were a little bit outside the box in my last agency, where we would bring a prospective officer candidate in. They would make the application out. We would ask them a set of questions, and then we would put them in the car and take them over to a local grocery store. And we would walk them in, and we would say, okay, that person at the meat counter over there, go have a conversation with him and bring back 5 things that you learned about him.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
if they can't do that, then that's not somebody that we want in our organization.
Right.
Because they're not able to communicate with people. And fundamentally, if you're going to be a police officer, you have to like people.
Seems like a big
It's
thing.
It's the thing.
Communication.
You have to like people
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
And yes, you go through a career and sometimes you get a little jaded because what you're seeing is people in their worst moment.
Right,
But you
right.
have to continually, reaffirm to yourself that this is a percentage. This
Mm-hmm.
is like, the national news every night, okay? This is not happening
Right.
everywhere all the time kind of thing. These are sensational events. And it's the same, in policing, that there's a small group that you deal with that
Mm-hmm.
are in crisis, that you get called to for whatever reason. And, but that's not the majority of the people in your community.
It makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense. Yeah.
Why doesn't everybody else see this,
I
right?
don't know. What a good question. I deeply appreciate the fact that you are, this isn't the right term, I know, but humanizing our police department's perspective of others and the community's perspective of the police department. It seems like you are so intentionally building bridges, and what a massive thing to be striving for. And it is evident in the work that you're doing. I feel like so many can feel it because of that. And your staff, your officers are certainly going to, over time, be better officers for this, for what you're enforcing in them and empowering them to do. They're probably ultimately going to, your new recruits as they come in, going to be so much more equipped too, if you can talk with people and show them that respect on the front end. It just feels like you're laying a smoother path.
I think so. because you're laying the foundation that people in your community support you.
Right.
They give you the authority to do your job, and that's the paradigm that you need to operate by. And in policing, I think it's a balance, because what you need is, the community needs people that will go out there and bring order to chaos in some bad situations, whether it's a traffic accident, whether it's a assault, whether it's a fight, whatever the case may be. So you need individuals that have a certain level of ego and ability to do that. But you also need people that know when to switch it on, when to switch it off, and who you're talking to. And that's a big deal for me, because I paid very close attention to people that I admired and people that I did not admire in policing.
Right?
And I learned a lot from both. Probably more from the people that I really didn't appreciate their leadership style. And I think for me as a police chief now here in Grand Island, I need to listen to the community. I need to listen to the council, ask a lot of questions to kind of, make sure that I understand what the concerns are. But then on the department side, on the police department side, when I turn around and present the issue, I need to present it in a way that operationalizes the police department's efforts effectively.
Right.
And I can't sell myself out to the department. I can't come back and say, hey, this is what we're hearing out there, and they go, that's ridiculous, we can't do that, or that doesn't make any sense, or
Right.
I need to be able to formulate what that looks like operationally in a police function.
Right.
And be true to both, be true and transparent and real with the community and the council, and then try to operationalize that in a police function. Because if we can't do safety and security, if we can't keep our community safe with the resources that we're given, then we don't have any business doing any other job. So that's always job one.
That's fair.
And so operationalizing the community expectations in what level of safety and security they expect to have, is a big deal for me, as far as the leadership, and not trying to sell out either group. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of a translator to some degree, I think, and I saw some police chiefs that were really good at doing that, and I really respected them. And I saw some that they were struggling because they would either they would sell out the officers, and the officers would go, they wouldn't have respect because they didn't feel like they were being supported.
Right.
In what were efforts that were probably going to be more productive than others. So it's important for me to do that, because we have limited resources, and we need to focus those resources in a surgical way. I think
It's well put.
that needs to be a difference over 21st century policing, over 20th century policing, is that everybody has limited resources, but we can't just do a shotgun approach. We need to analyze, we need to look at data, we need to collaborate, we need to ask community, what are the issues, and then we need to operationalize that in a surgical way, not in just a throw it out there and a zero tolerance type of thing, or in this area or on this street or whatever.
Well, it quickly becomes
needs to be a
so.
lot more buy-in.
Yes, and it becomes so divisive if you start operating that way. And instead of having your community and then your police department, I just feel like what you're trying to do here is say, no, our police department is part of the community. It's not apart from. So
Yeah, one thing
feels
that
intentional.
where I came in Irving, 30 years ago now, I didn't get the connection with the other city services. I didn't get the connection as a police officer with the council. And so one of the things that we're doing that I wanted to reinforce, not only with the police officers, but also with the council themselves, is that whenever we have a new police officer that's gone through the training process, and they are now about to be out on their own, in the community on their own, hopefully for the next 20 or 30 years in one form or fashion.
Right.
What I do is I bring them to a council meeting, and then we have a council member that's going to pin the badge on. So I'll give them a ceremonial swearing in, and then a council member will be the one that pins the badge on.
Oh, that's cool.
And then the council member, I asked to ride out with that officer for at least 2 hours.
Oh, yeah.
So they get to know the officer, and
Yeah.
the officer gets to know that the authority comes officially from the council, which represents the
Sure.
community. And I think that's a big paradigm to get.
Right.
That badge is not something that you hide behind. It's a symbol of the authority that's given to you by the community.
Right,
to
it's a
protect
lot of
them.
trust
It's
with
a
that.
lot of trust.
Yeah.
And there's a song that says that badge doesn't weigh very much until you put it on, and you don't realize the weight of that badge because
Sure.
you have the whole community,
Yeah.
hopefully the whole community that you represent, supporting what you're doing.
Sure.
And the leadership is important to make sure that the focus and the things that you are doing are true to what those community expectations are.
Right. Everyone has a responsibility.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Chief, I have so very much enjoyed chatting with you. One thing I don't want to have you leave and not have asked you is about future of the police department. What do you envision? And then also like folding that into your new recruits and looking for new recruits. So future of police department and your new police officers. What do you envision?
Well, I'm excited about the vision because it's a collaborative vision, not only with the community and the police department, but it's a place that we're going to grow and go and be challenged as we do that over the next 3 to 5 years. Grand Island is poised in a position for growth. The police department is going to be ready for that growth as well.
Great.
We're going to, number one, deal with criminal issues in and around Grand Island. That means finding out what the issues are, working with the community, having that trust and respect from the community that they'll call, because
Yeah.
we're talking about a very small number of people that are police officers in a community of probably close to about 60,000 people. So ideally, in the short term, we're going to build back our staffing levels. We were down about 25% of our police officers in January of this year. And by December, we should have most, if not all, of the spots filled. So that's good. That's a huge plus.
Yeah, no kidding.
But that's a huge paradigm shift as well in a direction that gives us the opportunity to go in a direction that is new, is a little bit different than what it used to be based on what the community's expectations are and where Grand Island is going. And so over the next few years, as we build back our staffing levels, what we're going to do is we're going to surgically, as I mentioned before, we're going to surgically deal with crime issues and quality of life issues. So the crime issues deal with the small amount of people in a community that commit most of the crimes, and we're going to deal with that. We're going to address that, and that will be dealt with intentionally and in a surgical manner. The other one's quality of life issues, and part of that's traffic issues. So we have high accident areas. We have we have school zones that we want to make sure we patrol properly. So those are things that another unit would be very applicable for, that a normal patrol function doesn't cover very well.
Okay.
And so what we do is we would build and stand up a traffic unit that would deal specifically with traffic issues.
Oh,
And
wow.
then that way you'd have a unit that's dedicated around the city for those kind of things. And really the third leg to all of this, to me, is a quality of life and dealing with mental health all over, in the community, in the police department, everywhere.
Right.
Mental health, addiction, homelessness, those are things that the police department is either directly involved in because of calls for service, or they're peripherally involved in because we need to go with mental health professionals
Yeah.
in order to help and check on people and see what's going on. So I see a lot of nonprofits, a lot of shelters, a lot of people in the community of Grand Island that are doing great things, and I think the police department can help in maybe bridging some of those silos that aren't set up in a negative way, but are just set up because people don't have the resources in those areas in order to make bridges and close the gaps.
Right.
And so the police department going forward will probably collaborate with a lot of the nonprofits, mental health providers,
That's awesome.
and have a law enforcement component in that that will be able to strategically long-term deal with case management of individuals that are trying to work their way out. So to provide a resiliency structure.
Yes.
So when they go from one nonprofit or one facility to another, they're working their way out instead of getting back in the cycle.
Right, the
And so-
hamster wheel.
That's right.
thing.
We don't want that. And if we
No.
can help lend a team that can help provide some support and resiliency in between those gaps and continue that rise out of where they are, then I think we're doing a lot for the community. And
Yes.
without a lot of effort from the police department, except an intentional devotion of resources to that effort as well. And so what we're talking about over the next few years is increase in resources. That mostly means personnel, and not a huge increase, probably more like a 10 to 15% increase over the next 4 or 5 years. But what that will net us is a tremendous decrease in crime, is a tremendous increase, in my opinion, in quality of life and how we're dealing with a lot of the crisis issues that are right now starting to increase here in Grand Island. So we're going to be working on a lot of different fronts and partnering with a lot of different entities within Grand Island to help reduce a lot of the issues that are on the rise right now.
Yeah, and I feel like also what I'm hearing you say too is you're trying to get away from that symptomatic treatment and work more in prevention. That's
Yes,
if that makes sense.
yeah,
Because otherwise you're just catching people as they fall, right?
right. And some of that involves not a police officer function. So I think we do best when we stay in our lane for the most part. We go through a lot of training, mental health training. We go through other types of training, but that training only gets us to the point where we should be able to recognize somebody that's in a mental health crisis, and then we should be able to engage the proper people, the professionals, to help mitigate and deal with that in the long-term way.
Yeah.
And so the police officers are best when they're working in their lane, doing police functions, but able to engage other aspects of the community that can bring long-term services that are better than what the police services would provide to that individual. And so that's what we're looking at, is better integrating that, and also better bringing in people in the police department. We already have a co-responder unit that is basically counselor-led that goes out and helps mitigate some of the mental health and addiction issues that we respond to. And so they are great at that, and they do 15 to 20 a month probably, where otherwise we would have to deal with them in a police way, which is not the best way to handle a lot of that.
Right.
And so that's a good aspect. We also have a victims assistance. We have 2 victims assistance coordinators, and they help a lot in following up with victims and providing information to them. And so, as you see police departments, and our police department will be no different, we will expand slightly the police presence because we need to deal with the criminal element and things that police traditionally deal with. But we're also going to expand the non-police function, and we're going to elevate some of those positions to more supervisory and manager positions. Because I think internally and externally, the police, having a police officer deal with some things is not the best answer, as we all know.
Yeah.
And
Having
internally
any
the same way.
entity kind of cross into a space they really don't belong in isn't ideal. So absolutely.
Yeah, and you look at the police department just internally, and some of the examples, not only victims assistance, but co-responders, those are not police officer functions, but they're great to have as part of the police department. And other areas as well, property and evidence. That's a non-police function for the most part. A lot of people want to be in policing, but they want to do CSI, or they want to do that kind of thing. And so you don't have to be a police officer to do that, but you can get into a police department and do that in a non-police function. It's extremely helpful. And then you have people that want to do it and that are skilled at it, and they're doing it better than if we had moved a police officer from another area to do that kind of thing.
That's so cool. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your team and our community to have you at this helm. You're doing good things, effective things, and I know you will continue to do so. I mean, the writing is on the wall. So thank you so much, Chief Denny, for everything.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to talk about it. I love talking about it. It always helps me reaffirm my leadership and the direction and the vision. And so I think it's very helpful. So I appreciate the invite, and thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and thank you to JBS for being our series sponsor. I'm Lindsay Juergens. This is Chief Denny, and this is Leaders Like Us.